you have to increase your minimum effort required. This is the mantra upon which the foundation for a sprawling NoSleep series was built, a story that utilized the communities of both NoSleep and Reddit proper perhaps better than any other NoSleep story ever has. This is the story of David King, or I dared my best friend to ruin my life. He's succeeding. Written by Harrison Prince, I Dared My Best Friend to Ruin My Life began being posted on June 26, 2016, and was released to immediate acclaim, garnering over 6,200 upvotes and sparking a discussion that spanned over 200 comments of people discussing the events of the story. The story centers on main character Xander, who notes that he is writing this first installment from a church, utilizing the free Wi-Fi, and recalls a conversation he had with David King, the story's antagonist, 2 years prior. The conversation revolved around their stagnating lives, both living with their parents, both working minimum wage jobs. David points out that life was easy when they were in high school, saying, quote, "High school was so easy because we knew our purpose and our goals were set for us. Outline the English essay, finish the math homework, get decent grades, pass the driving exam, be home by curfew, find a girlfriend. Now that we're out of high school, there's no structure. Our lives have become meaningless and we're just floating through space with no aim or purpose." Asking what the solution to the absence of such a structure is, David remarks, "Either go somewhere that has structure and can deliver what high school gave us, or create our own structure." Continuing, quote, "The thing about high school was that it required a minimum effort. If you didn't give that minimum effort, you would face the consequences. The consequences were bad enough that you and I would put effort into school. When high school ended, that minimum effort level decreased. Now our minimum effort is not enough to improve ourselves. Whatever structure we build has to have those consequences built in, and a minimum effort that forces us to improve constantly." As I mentioned, this philosophy is the foundation for the entire series, the idea that sets the coming events into motion. At the end of their conversation, each dares the other to ruin their life, to force the other into adapting to their situation, lest they face consequences bad enough to motivate them to do so. It's an interesting concept. Beyond the downright harrowing events of the story, that philosophy does have a certain sense to it. The immediate years after high school can be a difficult transition. Of course, many people do have college lined up, which extends the academic structure people had for the previous 4 years. But for those who aren't entirely sure what they want to do, it can be difficult finding a frame within which to live. The David King series, as it came to be known, expands on these ideas in a captivating way. David and Xander stop seeing each other socially following the aforementioned conversation, but the two still share the same job at a local movie theater. Xander does menial things, such as sprinkling popcorn over an area David has just cleaned, at which David just laughs, asking, "Is that supposed to ruin my life?" After a short while, Xander gets fired from the job. Not long after that, Xander's parents come to him, asking him if he'd been taking cash from their wallets, eventually accusing him of stealing his mom's debit card and withdrawing several $100s. This gets Xander kicked out of his house, at which point he moves into an apartment with a few roommates. He forgets all about his dare with David, after not having seen him since they stopped working together. For a time, Xander's life was good, but over the course of 9 months, things went up a notch. Every day, he would get an overflow of junk mail, both physical and electronic. His social media pages were sabotaged, with fake profiles of his being created while he was locked out of his real ones, which would post hundreds of pornographic images daily. His burgeoning relationship with a girl named Katie is threatened when she gets a message on Facebook from Xander's profile saying he's breaking up with her. He and his parents' credit is destroyed by a flood of credit cards and accounts being opened in their names and maxed out. One night, the windows on Xander's car are smashed. He gets them fixed, but they are almost immediately smashed again, this time with a note folded up and left in the ignition, stating, "You have to increase your minimum effort," letting Xander know that all of his poor luck of late hadn't been luck at all, but rather the organized effort of who would come to be almost universally referred to as David King. The entire story, which spans 17 parts over 2 distinct narratives, goes much deeper into the psyche of someone who takes their dare to its absolute extremes. Harrison Prince came up with the story in response to an earlier work of his entitled A Warning About Psychopaths, written under an alt account for NoSleep, with Prince stating that he wanted to write a story that took a closer look at a one-on-one with a psychopath, as he has great interest in the topic.
You know, I have the saying, work like someone's trying to take it all away from you. You know, I actually work like someone's spending 24 hours, working 24 hours to take it all away from you. And that's kind of the way I look at it.
After hearing this quote by Mark Cuban, Prince had the idea for the dare, and on June 26, 2016, he sat down, wrote the first part, and posted it that same day. Each subsequent installment was written and posted following the previous part being released. Sometime around Part 3's release, Harrison Prince had an idea. He was going to include everyone in the story, the entire NoSleep community, all of Reddit. This decision is what put the David King series into the annals of truly noteworthy NoSleep entries. By utilizing the NoSleep community and its rules in a way no other series had before it, Harrison Prince made readers feel as though they were influential in the way the story developed, and in a way, they were. Prince stated that he would read every single comment that found its way to his inbox, suspecting that they surely played some part as he continued to write, noting specifically that some users would point out errors or plot holes that he would fix in subsequent installments, or even address within the narrative of the story itself. This, of course, is normal for any NoSleep author, but to include the readers in the narrative itself was a twist that no one saw coming, because it had never been done before, and certainly not to such an extent. As was the case for many early NoSleep stories, the David King series had many readers believing that what they were reading was real, even beyond the rules of NoSleep, which dictate that everyone needs to act as though the story is true in the comments. Prince used alt accounts to continue the real feeling of everything by replying to messages and comments in character, to a greater extent than perhaps any NoSleep author before him. It was an elaborate extension of NoSleep's cardinal rule that saw people enthusiastically following the tribulations of Xander. Further adding to that realism was the fact that Prince's real-life education and career informed aspects of the story, from his early studies in computer science to his time spent working as a legal assistant, helping round out David King's electronic tactics, specifically identity theft. The use of technology was by no means unique to the story, but Prince utilized it by treating it as a practical tool that his characters employed in their respective goals, with David King using it to tear down Xander and his loved ones, and Xander eventually using it to fight back. The various pieces of technology put into use in the story are, above all else, realistic for such characters to be using. While David King may have considerably more resources at his disposal through his illicit activity, protagonist Xander has a more modest income, working for a large portion of the story as a cashier and eventual manager at McDonald's. He doesn't use state-of-the-art technology. He simply utilizes what he has in clever, pragmatic ways, and the authenticity of the story is that much stronger for it. The popularity of the David King series led to a subreddit being created, entitled r/FDavidKing, in which people spent considerable time looking for hard proof to confirm their suspicions about this story that they swore was true. The entitled, "I dared my best friend to ruin my life, he's succeeding," initially spanned 9 parts, but when Prince decided that there was more story to tell, another series was written. This one called, "I dared my best friend to end my life, he's succeeding," which went another 8 parts. Additionally, There are the lesser-known in-universe offerings, I Was Abducted While Studying Abroad, and To All Citizens of the Class, which provide a look into different aspects of the things going on in the series proper. And while NoSleep is primarily a space for horror literature, there are sometimes stories that don't necessarily fall perfectly into that category. The David King series is arguably the most popular example of that. Though structured like a horror story, Harrison Prince's saga fits into a number of other genres that are arguably more appropriate classifications, primarily that of action thrillers, but also drama and psychological thrillers. A major part of the success of the series was, in my opinion, the creation of an antagonist that drew from a number of previous characters, whether consciously or otherwise. David King harkens back to dedicated villains of film and television past, such as Tom Cruise's Vincent from the 2004 film Collateral, the One-Armed Man from David Lynch's seminal 1990 TV series Twin Peaks, and in particular, Robert De Niro's Max Cady from Martin Scorsese's 1991 classic, Cape Fear. But in Prince's own words, David King is the product entirely of his own mind, saying in response to a question asking him if there were any inspiration for any of the characters, quote, "Surprisingly, no, they just happened." If nothing else, this shows a true appreciation for his own work, a yearning to see his creation unfolded in the best possible way. Harrison Prince crafted an antagonist that people came to truly hate, one that they continued to hate even after learning he was the product of one creative scribe's imagination. While being showered with praise, deservedly so, Prince has remained humble, more than anything appreciative of the readers going along on the journey with him, and to an extent, helping him construct it. Ever conscious of not beating a dead horse and letting the story run too long or delve into tired tropes and cliches, Prince heeded the comments, saying, "Reading comments from people who were talking about the series definitely kept me aware of things to watch out for in terms of ways I could ruin the story. The consistent feedback kept me within the guidelines and kept the series from derailing." The David King series was Harrison Prince's second outing on NoSleep after his first Psychopath series, but he had been writing stories since he was in elementary school. And while he is certainly happy with how the story performed, and above all grateful to the readers who helped skyrocket it in the subreddit, he does have one aspect in particular that he would change. A friend who read the story pointed out to the author that despite all of the harrowing events the main character endures, there is little in the way of lasting effects. There is, of course, some psychological damage and trauma, which is as serious a repercussion as any. But if Prince could go back and change anything, it would be to give even more lasting damage to Xander, saying, quote, "He gets out of his legal troubles eventually, all of his financial problems get resolved, nothing that David did to him really sticks except the trauma." I tend to agree, and wish I had left more permanent physical damage on Xander, whether through an injury, finances, or legal trouble. The ending was still a happy ending, despite how dark the whole thing was. And aside from the lasting trauma, or lack thereof, Prince would address one other mistake he made in the initial story. In Part 7 of the first series, there is the line, quote, "Right now, as I am about to press submit, you just bought a sandwich at Jimmy John's, the meatball sub." Users were quick to point out that Jimmy John's doesn't have a meatball sub. However, Prince doesn't look at this oversight as all negative, saying, "Having that mistake connected me with the readers who pointed it out, so it made the mistake worthwhile." The David King series was a truly unique outing that exploited NoSleep's golden rule in the best way possible, and it rests comfortably at the top of countless readers' best of all time lists. Many people, myself included, have always wondered if there is more story to tell there, if Prince has ever considered checking in with Xander, Clark, Katie, and the others, and on that, there's good news and bad news, with Prince saying, "Yes, I have considered it. I have 4 drafts of a third Xander series. This doesn't seem like a series that I can just write in a marathon again. There's a lot of risk that I could ruin the entire series by making a mistake. None of those drafts are quite it. and there is such a thing as overdoing it and killing the original feelings people had while reading the first series. I may write drafts when the fancy strikes me, but I doubt I'll ever publish any of them. It's hard to recapture that lightning in a bottle. For me, knowing that the creator has an idea of where these characters are, these characters that readers came to know and care about in a way that more often than not we simply don't in NoSleep, it provides some sort of solace. Even though we will likely never know, it is good to know that they are still going strong in the mind of author Harrison Prince. Prince has gone on to write over 50 more short stories and series, and has left his mark on the world of internet horror fiction. There hasn't been a story quite like I Dared My Best Friend to Ruin My Life since, and it's a testament to Prince's drive and determination that his most well-known series was able to pull off what no other work on NoSleep had attempted before it. Be sure to check out more of Harrison Prince's work at the links in the description.